Good afternoon and welcome to the 5th annual Good Prize Luncheon. I am Mark Roithmer, the CEO with the Alzheimer's Drug Discovery Foundation. Just to give you a sense of the afternoon, please eat as you go here. We're going to have a couple of brief remarks. We're going to break. Everybody can finish lunch. We'll get dessert down, and then once that's down, the actual presentation of the award today. You may notice that not with us today is our wonderful, wonderful, wonderful co-founder, Leonard Lauder. Leonard recently had some surgery and could not be here today, but Nancy, he has written a letter to you that he has asked me to read. So bear with me. Dear Nancy, there isn't any place I'd rather be than with you, your family, and the many wonderful friends who are here today for the 5th annual Good Prize Luncheon. Unfortunately, back surgery has grounded me and I am unable to join you. But as we celebrate the exceptional scientists that are here today, I want to say a word about Mel, your dear husband and the prize's namesake. Mel is one of the driving forces behind ADDF's success, and his remarkable leadership, vision, drive, and courage are as inspirational to me today as when I very first met him. What a tremendous honor it was to know that the same person who brought the very first Alzheimer's drug to market would place his bet on the ADDF to defeat this terrible disease, which he himself now contends with. But that's Mel, thinking beyond himself and looking to help others. And of course, no less inspirational to me is the incredible you, Nancy. You've stewarded Mel's intentions over these years. Thank you for working to realize your shared vision of ensuring the future generations would not have to suffer from this disease, and for doing it with such dedication and grace. Yeah. Nancy, you and Mel are both heroes to the ADDF, to me, and certainly to the millions of men and women who you may never meet, but lives you are affecting. I send my love and gratitude to you both, my thanks to the amazing scientists, including this year's honoree, Jeff Cummings, and my very best wishes and gratitude to all your friends and supporters who have joined us today. Now, Leonard asked me to read that, but he also asked me to do something else, which is a little tight in here, so I'm not sure. Well, we'll see how well we do it. Those of us in the room who are privileged enough to know Leonard Lauder and the Lauder family know that family is very important to the Lauders. And in talking to Leonard about today, he says, you know, today is a great family day, Mark. And he asked me to do this. He asked me to say, everybody who's related to the Goods family, would you please stand up? Thank you. Right. Terrific. Thank you. He also asked me to have another family stand up in the room. Throughout the room, spread throughout the tables, are members of the ADDF Board of Governors and Board of Overseers. And Leonard considers you family. So will you please stand up if you're a Board of Overseer or Governor who are great philanthropists and stewards of the ADDF. And Leonard said I should thank him because he said, Mark, I just gave you the perfect segue to make the next introduction. Today is about family, about the ADDF family, about the Goods family, about the family of all those that are touched by Alzheimer's and dementia. And I get to introduce the head of the family, our host who brings us together today. She has passion, she has commitment, she has this incredible combination of relentlessness and grace. She's got quite the soul, and she is so full of love. Our host and the heart of all of our families in the room today, Nancy Goods.
I hope I can get through this. Hello, and thank you, Mark, for that generous introduction. As you know, this year marks the 5th anniversary of the Goods Prize. This morning, we hosted a seminar to catch up with the work of all the prize winners, including our newest, Dr. Jeffrey Cummings. It was a remarkable few hours, and I know that Mel, a man of intense curiosity, would have loved this scientific update. It's exactly what we envisioned when we launched the Goods Prize. This is the 10th year of Mel's diagnosis. He continues to amaze us despite the ravages of his disease. He remains caring and generous. He receives visitors warmly and with grace. His sense of humor and optimism still shines through. He enjoys his family, and I know he'd be very proud that his grandchildren are here today. Lauren, Caitlin, Andrew, and Kaylee are with us, and you'll hear directly from Kaylee soon. While this morning's seminar brought us all fresh hope, it also reminded us that there's much, much work still needs to be done. Mel said it himself after his diagnosis. He didn't expect biomedical science to ride to his rescue. Mel knew the realities. He had led a pharmaceutical company. He understood that breakthrough therapies take more than brains. They take time and money. Mel made it clear that despite the odds, he would fight like hell against Alzheimer's, and that we would do whatever we could to defeat the disease. We fought against Alzheimer's as advocates and benefactors. That's why we're all here today. But Mel has also confronted Alzheimer's in a much more personal way. Under medical supervision, he underwent an experimental therapy with difficult regimens. Even in the advanced state of the disease, he challenges Alzheimer's in every way he still can. He sings with gusto at music therapy. He pushes himself through serious physical exercise. And I'm convinced that Mel sees himself as a one-person experiment in defying Alzheimer's. Even though he can't express it, I know he's proud of his resilience. And I know he'd be very proud of all of you for what you do to fight Alzheimer's, as scientists, as donors, and as family and friends. Thank you for sharing the passion that Mel shows us every day. Thanks for being here, and thanks for joining us to support ADDF, and know that true to their word, hope is on the horizon. And now here's a special video on Mel to show you his fight.
And pull the bear.
Cola bear, get my colas here.
Yeah.
Nancy.
Are you directing?
Yeah, you.
Directing me?
Yes.
What do you need, honey?
Every you, every day.
Oh.
Be a part of it. Who loves you?
Who loves me?
Yeah,
Pretty much everybody.
everybody. It's beautiful.
Oh.
Who loves you?
Oh, again?
Thank you. And now that you know more about Mel, let me introduce one of our best friends and another great leader in the fight against Alzheimer's, ADDF's board chair, Randall Sandler.
Thank you, Nancy. You're a tireless champion for our cause. I'm so proud and humbled to be your partner. As we heard from you and saw for ourselves in that wonderful video, Mel is an inspiration to us all. When I need a lift, I watch his speech from 2010. when he first spoke to us about his diagnosis and his approach to dealing with it. It always gives me hope, and I encourage all of you to watch that speech. He is truly bigger than the disease he deals with every day, and he has fought this battle with courage, dignity, and even humor, and with his loving family at his side. But his battle is not about him, but about the health and well-being of people he has actually never met. Mel is committed to the next generation, the millions of people who will get this horrific disease in years to come as the population ages. And that is what he is doing as a dear friend of the ADDF. Mel, along with countless families who face the struggles of Alzheimer's every day, many of whom are here today, is a driving force behind the ADDF. And in the 10 years I have known him, he has been a constant inspiration to me. When Leonard and Ronald Lauder started the ADDF 20 years ago, it had one sole mission in mind: a future without Alzheimer's. Like Mel in his successful career, we knew that we would not achieve our goal without taking some risk. When pharmaceutical companies went all in with billions of funding of amyloid research and therapies, which has only yielded failure after failure, the ADDF took a different approach. The ADDF leaned in, finding and funding other novel therapeutics that are linked to a simple concept, that biology of aging is the biggest risk factor for Alzheimer's. It's very fortunate that we did, because some of the alternative targets that we invested in 10 to 15 years ago, including repurposed drugs, have now progressed to human clinical trials that are still going strong and give us a lot to be hopeful about. Thanks to the ongoing support of the ADDF and its supporters over the past 2 decades, their pioneering research is progressing to phase 2 and 1 in phase 3. We are so pleased to commemorate 5 years of the Goods Prize, it's hard to believe, with all the awardees here with us today, a murderer's row, if you will, of Alzheimer's researchers. I'm not going to go into all the science, I'm not qualified for that, but you heard that this morning. But I would like to recognize the remarkable research of our previous winners: Dr. Michaela Gallagher, 2018, Dr. Robbie Brinton, 2017. Dr. Daniel Martin Watterson, 2016. And Dr. Frank Longo, 2015. And you will hear more about this year's honoree, Dr. Jeffrey Cummings, after lunch. On behalf of the Board of Governors of the ADDF, I thank you all for your dedication. Your work represents the most novel approach to the development and advancement of Alzheimer's research today. This would not be possible without the support of people like Mel and Nancy Goods, and all of you. Together, we are changing the face of Alzheimer's research, setting new directions, uncovering new discoveries, but there is still much work to do. Mel knew what challenges lie ahead, and as he said, we are going to fight like hell to overcome them. With this spirit and the support of the devoted, determined philanthropists like Mel and Nancy Goods, and the determined and brilliant efforts of the scientists like Dr. Cummings and all 5 award recipients here with us today, we will achieve our mission at the Alzheimer's Drug Discovery Foundation and Mel's hope: a future without Alzheimer's. So thank you, Nancy, and the entire Goods family. I can think of no better name for the most important prize in Alzheimer's research. And thank you for all being here with us today to honor Mel's cause and celebrate the important work of Dr. Cummings. Please enjoy your lunch, and we'll be back shortly.
I thought Randall Sandler's remarks were great, and I want to touch on a phrase he used. He called all of our Goods Prize winners in the room, he called them murderer's row. And so I think that makes, so if that's a team, that makes the Goods families the owner of the team. But then I started thinking, who's the coach? Who's the manager? And I've been kind of Googling, and Howard, I think that makes Casey Stengel the manager. It is my pleasure at this point to bring forward our founding executive director, our chief science officer, a man of great vision and persistence, Dr. Howard Phillip.
Thanks, Mark. You know, I being a Yankee fan and a New Yorker, I can't remember all the things that Casey Stengel said, but I did, as Mark was speaking, remember what Yogi Berra said, among the many things. And one thing he said was, when you come to a fork in the road, take it. So, you know, that's something that we did. I first want to thank Nancy. We've been working with Nancy for, 10, 15 years now, and with Mel, of course. It's just been a wonderful journey, and I just want to thank Nancy and her family so much for working with us. We're really very, very grateful to you. Thank you very much, Nancy. I think what you heard this morning about the Goods Prize from the 5 scientists that were on the panel is really the value of the prize. It's not just the award, and it's not just the money, but it is what it enables the scientists to do with the money. And the scientists that are chosen or proposed internally by our staff, and then vetted externally by a panel of scientists around the world. And when we identify people and choose them, it's really, as you heard this morning, a recognition of lifetime achievement. I think everyone on the panel has been involved in Alzheimer's drug research for at least 20 years, and involved in Alzheimer's research for most, if not all, of their professional career. And so all of us, and I include myself in this, but particularly for the people that have won the Goods Prize, these are people that have dedicated their lives to solving this problem, to finding drugs for Alzheimer's disease. And I just want to thank everyone on the panel today for their lifetime efforts for working together and trying to find a cure for Alzheimer's disease. Thank you very much. You heard this morning about our scientific strategy. For those of you who weren't at the panel this morning, the strategy of our foundation from the founding was to be innovative, to fund things that weren't in the mainstream, but had worthiness. As a scientist who ran a lab for 20 years at Rockefeller and Mount Sinai here in New York, I know the frustration that we can have depending on getting vetted by NIH, for example, where there's a bias to be mainstream. And if you're innovative, it's hard to get funding. And so from the beginning, we really tried to build on that experience and make sure that we filled the gap, and particularly in drug research, where it's very hard to get money for new ideas. And the other thing that I want to say from the beginning, you've heard a lot about the biology of aging, and as I mentioned this morning, we've, and I don't mean to say this because we may be right, but because this was just the way it went, that from the beginning, we recognized that there are over 150 different types of amyloid disease in human beings, and most of those are what we call secondary diseases, which means that the deposition of amyloid in various tissues is secondary to other diseases like rheumatoid arthritis, and in the old days, tuberculosis and chronic malaria and diseases like that. And the way I like to make the analogy over many years as to why amyloid approaches may not work and have been, even though, well, let me just say why they haven't worked, is if you think about cutting yourself, you get a scar. In my mind, treating the amyloid is like treating the scar and not getting at the reason you got cut. In other words, these plaques are the tombstone of a chronic neurodegenerative process in the brain. And for a couple of decades now, Big Pharma's taken these pathological clues, which rightfully so, and tried to develop drugs, and it hasn't worked. From the beginning, we've recognized that aging is the leading risk factor for Alzheimer's disease, far and away, far and above any other risk factor, lifestyle or whatever. And so what we've done is taken advantage of almost 100 years of research on aging, and only about 35 years or so of research on Alzheimer's, but 100 years of research on aging, biological aging, where diseases like chronic lung disease, chronic kidney disease, chronic heart disease, all these organs that are affected by aging, these are all, even cancer is a disease of aging, translating the mechanisms that relate to why people get organ-specific dysfunction and recognizing that the brain is simply one of those organs, and then taking the therapeutic opportunities that have gotten from those other diseases and applying them to Alzheimer's. And that's really why repurposing works. Because when you have a successful drug for a chronic neurodegenerative disease like Parkinson's disease, and it's a drug like rasagiline that we talked about today, actually has been shown to slow the progression of Parkinson's disease. Why not try it for diseases like Alzheimer's, and especially when there's evidence? So I think we have a pretty good strategy, and I think it's paid off. Just in the last 6 months, we've had 4 positive phase 2A clinical trials. Now, what does that really mean? I would say that, first of all, Alzheimer's is a uniquely human disease of the human mind, and we have cured mice over 500 times with drugs, and none of them so far have translated into human beings. Why is that? I think among all diseases, it's hard to translate animal models into a human therapeutic approach, but think about the fact that mice don't write books, okay? The human mind is so unique. It's so unique that really we have to do human research to discover new drugs for Alzheimer's disease. We have to do the experiments in humans and learn from those experiments to develop drugs. And so it's not just all or none, the drug worked, the drug didn't work. It's what can we learn from these trials? We have to do trials. We have to apply these drugs. We have to design the drugs in a unique way. We have to get the right population. We have to get the right drug. We have to get the right biomarkers. As many of you know, we have a $50 million program of biomarkers to develop novel biomarkers for Alzheimer's disease with the Gates and Jeff and Mackenzie Bezos and others. And that's why biomarkers are so important, because they give us outcomes in human clinical research that we can measure and learn how a drug works, and even if a drug works. One of the most well-known clinical trialists, and when you think about clinical trials, I mean, if you think about different scientists, you know, you've got a chemist, specialist in chemist, he's a specialist in this kind of chemistry, a biologist who's a specialist. What's happened is clinical trials are really, really, really complicated. They're really hard to do. They're difficult to design. They require creativity. They require statistical analysis that's very sophisticated. And I think we generally underestimate how hard and how scientifically rigorous it is to do human clinical trials. And one of the people in this room who has been a friend for 40 years, and he and I grew up together in this space, is Jeff Cummings, who's the awardee today for the Goods Prize. And it's really an honor for me to be able to give Jeff this award. Jeff is one of the hardest working people I've ever met. He is so dedicated to his work and is a specialist, a worldwide recognized leader in clinical trials. That's what his specialty is. And Jeff is a sought-after consultant by practically every biotech company and pharmaceutical company and academic that I know of who wants to design and conduct a clinical trial. We talked with Jeff, I guess it must be a couple of years ago now, about doing a repurposing clinical trial of a drug for Parkinson's disease called rasagiline. Jeff was very excited about it. We worked with him to design the trial. As Jeff mentioned this morning, we brought in some resources, a company that we had funded that helps to analyze brain imaging techniques. We helped to get some biomarkers that are novel for measuring how the cells are dying in human brains, this tau imaging, which is going to be, I believe, the next FDA-approved diagnostic test for Alzheimer's that's going to be even better than the one we have on the market today. And this is the first trial that's ever used this new tau imaging as an outcome measure in Alzheimer's. And the bottom line is that this trial was what we would call a positive trial. It was positive in the sense that almost all the patients responded clinically in the trends and improvement in their cognitive function, and it hit the biomarker outcomes that we proposed, that Jeff proposed in the trial. And so his work is a positive trial. In all the negativity that you've heard, Jeff has a positive trial. And he's going to get more money because we want to replicate it. So far, we've studied a small sample. It's what we call an exploratory study. This is where innovation comes from in human clinical research. And this exploratory study will lead, I'm sure, as you heard this morning, Robbie Brinton getting $37.5 million for her advanced clinical trial that we helped to catalyze, and Michaela Gallagher getting $28 million from the NIH to do a clinical trial based on some earlier work that we helped to support. So it is our job to catalyze, get that preliminary data, look at the experiments, and then hope that government that has $2.4 billion to spend, or pharmaceutical companies will come in with the larger dollars to prove it. It's our job to be in that niche to catalyze innovation. Jeff is the author of, I think, 750 articles. He's very prolific, something like 40 books. I don't know how he does it. He's a vice chair of research at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas Department of Brain Health. He's the founding director of the Cleveland Clinic Lou Ruvo Center for Brain Health. And as I mentioned earlier, if any of you are in Las Vegas and you want to see a great architectural landmark, the center was designed by Frank Gehry and looks a little bit like the Bilbao Museum. And Jeff is a professor of medicine and neurology at the Cleveland Clinic. And he really is the essence of the Goods Prize, and it's just my great honor to be here at the podium with Jeff and give him this award. Jeff, thank you. Yeah, please. Yeah, please do. I'm just going to put this down.
Great. Thank you all for being here and to celebrate this with me. I feel humbled by receiving this award, and again, congratulations to the other awardees. Nancy, I wanted to talk specifically about Tacrin because Mel Goods was responsible for bringing the very first treatment for Alzheimer's disease to market in his position as a leader of a pharmaceutical company. And I think we do not acknowledge our debt to Tacrin with sufficient thoughtfulness. So Tacrin was the first drug. Imagine that in all of human history, no treatment exists until this drug appears. I mean, that's a remarkable event that something like that happens, and it happens only because people get behind it and do what's necessary to bring that kind of market through that kind of product through the science and into the market. Now, what were those trials like? This was so long ago that it was 1993 that this drug was approved, okay? So it was quite a while ago. What were the tools? Well, they were the mini mental status exam, the ADAS-Cog, an Alzheimer's disease assessment scale, a global scale called the CGI, and an ADL measure. So I just finished, as you heard, in 2019, a trial. What were the tools that I used? Well, I thought I'd use the mini mental state exam. I thought I'd use the ADAS-Cog. I thought I'd use the CGI, and I thought I'd use an ADL scale. So we live in the debt of Tacrin because those trials defined how Alzheimer's disease trials are done. And we still don't have better tools than in those first trials. So yes, for other populations where they have very mild symptoms, we use other tools. But for the kind of trial that most drugs are tested in, we use exactly the same tools now that we did then. There's also a perspective that he brought, and that is Alzheimer's disease is treatable. Okay, we all live with that assumption. We're just looking for the drug. It's a treatable disease, and we're looking for a drug. Well, that was not the assumption when Mel brought this drug out. I remember going around and talking about Tacrin to my neurological colleagues, and they would say, Jeff, this makes no sense. It's a neurodegenerative disease. By definition, it cannot be treated. By definition, it can't be treated. But of course, that perspective of it's a treatable disease is the world we live in now. We're just waiting for it to happen. We know it's going to happen, right? Howard is leading us to it. So we know it's going to happen. But that was a novel perspective in 1993 when Tacrin was approved. It was unheard of that Alzheimer's disease was a treatable disorder. It also led to the most commonly used Alzheimer's disease treatments that we have now. Because Tacrin was the first drug in the series of drugs that became Aricept, that became Exelon, and that became galantamine. So it was the first drug. And that's what happens when a new drug is approved. And this was one of Howard's points today. When a new drug is approved, then there will be an explosion of activity in that area because we know that that's a target that works. So that's so important to have that first drug, that breakthrough drug. Tacrin was such a drug. He also committed pharma to finding a solution for a major public health problem. And that's so important. And we see the flight of pharma now from Alzheimer's disease because of many failures. Well, there were no successes before he did this, 0 successes. So he had to be courageous in terms of taking this on and convincing his company that it was a worthwhile effort to try to find a treatment for Alzheimer's disease. And it changed the world. It changed the world. What about its impact on me? So I never met Mel. I'm sorry that I didn't. But there was a tool that was used in the early trials called the ADAS non-cog. It was a way of measuring behavioral changes in patients with Alzheimer's disease, and it was pretty bad. It was pretty bad. And at the same time that Tacrin came out, I was working on a tool called the Neuropsychiatric Inventory, the NPI. So I thought, well, let's use this brand new tool that I had and see whether Tacrin has any behavioral effects. And it had terrific behavioral effects that we had not appreciated because it was a cognitive drug. So no one really anticipated that it would have behavioral effects. But of course, you're changing the chemistry of the brain, and the chemistry of the brain has to do with behavior as well as cognition, right? So of course it changed behavior. But we had to have the tool that would tell that story. So we captured with the NPI the changes in behavior with Tacrin. That was one of our very first papers with the NPI. And that the NPI has since become the standard behavioral measure in clinical trials, and it has been used in over 350 clinical trials since then. And it was informed by Tacrin. Our first 3 papers on the NPI were with Tacrin. So that's the kind of influence on my own career. I'll just tell a story of how something that he could not have anticipated has affected someone who's done this work. So I'll finish by saying the ADDF is so great and has supported our work, and I'm very appreciative of that. Has supported our work not only financially but by linking us with experts and other technologies. The Goods Awards allows us now to finish that work because there were so many great unanticipated things in our trial that we didn't budget for them. Now we're going to do them. We're going to have biomarkers and analyses, and we're going to prepare this drug for the next step. I couldn't be more delighted. I couldn't be more thankful or more honored by what's happened today. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I would like to start off by congratulating Dr. Jeffrey Cummins once again for all of his amazing work in the Alzheimer's drug research. I know that everyone in this room is extremely grateful for everything that you do in the fight against Alzheimer's. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Kaylee Casters, and I'm the second oldest grandchild of Mel Goods. Last year at this event, you heard my older sister Brittany speak. She spoke about how fortunate she was to be able to spend the first 14 years of her life with our healthy grandfather, and reflected on the many memories and lessons that she will always remember. Unfortunately, although I'm only 2 years younger, my experience has been a little different with my grandfather. For most of what I can remember, my grandfather has always had Alzheimer's. There are little memories here or there from when he was fully healthy, but the majority of them are from the last 10 years. Just because my grandfather has been suffering from Alzheimer's for most of what I can remember, it does not at all discount the time that we have spent together. Every single time I go and visit Nancy and my grandpa, I always walk away feeling motivated. Even in the hardest of struggles, my grandpa manages to have a smile across his face and crack a countless number of jokes. He manages to light up a room without even trying and make a rainy afternoon become entertaining just sitting on the couch watching an old rerun of a hockey game. This constant positive attitude that my grandfather has possessed for as long as I remember has taught me so much. It has shown me that you need to attack the challenges that life throws our way straight on. Challenges are going to happen whether we like them or not, and how you handle those bumps in the road can show your true strength and can have an everlasting impact on those around you. As I've gotten older, I've been fortunate enough to meet many friends of my grandpa and Nancy. Every single person that I've had the opportunity to talk to has talked elaborately about my grandpa. They've never had a bad thing to say and always tell me how lucky I am to have a grandfather like him. It is my goal in life to be loved and looked up to as much as my grandfather is. If I could just become half of the person that he is, I would be extremely lucky. I really wish that my grandfather could be here today at this event for so many reasons. I wish that he could be here to witness the strides that we are taking to fight Alzheimer's. I wish that he could be here to see how much of an impact he has had on every single life he has been a part of. And lastly, I wish he could be here to see the personal growth and development that I've had over the years. I know he would be so proud of me, but little does he know, I owe the majority of any successes I've had to the lessons that he has taught me and my family. Lastly, let me tell you a little bit about myself and my studies. I'm currently in my 4th year at the University of Virginia studying speech-language pathology. For those of you who don't know, many SLPs work with individuals with neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is often a topic of conversation in my classes. So last year in one of my classes, I had a moment that I'll never forget. My professor was lecturing about Alzheimer's and asked everyone in the room to stand up if they know anyone that has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's or some other form of dementia. Out of a class of about 40 students, more than 3/4 were standing. This visual representation of the magnitude of Alzheimer's really struck me. I thought to myself, if this many people were impacted, why isn't there a cure yet? Although we are taking huge strides with the work that Dr. Jeffrey Cummings and other researchers are completing, we still have a hill to overcome. My hope for the future is that one day, when my professor is giving that same lecture and he asks those who have been affected by Alzheimer's in some way to stand up, that eventually everyone in the room will remain seated. In closing, I would like to thank the ADDF and everyone here for supporting such an important cause. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. It's been a wonderful event.